Life is getting more and more unfair, but it's also getting more fair at the same time. It's getting more unfair because capital concentrates in fewer and fewer hands. So if you're just the average Joe or the average Jane, and you had been this, say, 50 years ago, you could come by relatively well, right? You could feed your family of several kids. You could have only one person working in the entire household, and you would be doing okay. Nowadays, that's not possible anymore, right? Nowadays, you cannot be average anymore. You have to be above average just to have a regular family life. So that's more unfair. But on the other hand, becoming above average nowadays is much easier than it has ever been. If you have a strong drive to outperform the average Joe or Jane financially, you've got way better tools to do this now. In the early days, you had to know the right people, right? You had to do networking. You had to be friends with the right people. You had to know somebody in the movie industry in order to get hired as an actor. You had to know people, right? It was all about connections. It was all about networking. Things have changed in the last 20, 30 years, right? Now it's suddenly the nerds that become billionaires. Now it's suddenly the programmers that become millionaires. It's not necessarily anymore the most social people. It's not necessarily anymore the people that have most friends, that are best networked, that are actually financially the most successful. It's now the people that have analytical skills that tend to outperform. It's now the people that work the hardest that tend to outperform. I believe now the world is more fair because I believe now it's more merit-based. If you're publishing videos on YouTube, for example, right, then YouTube has all kinds of algorithms to determine whether or not your video should be shown to more people. People are simply just deciding, should I watch this video, should I not watch this video? They're deciding this based on the thumbnail or based on the title. Then once they decide to click, then they watch the video, then they decide how long should I watch. So you've got the average watch time, you've got the watch time retention, all kinds of metrics. Then YouTube is simply just looking at those metrics, right? They're not really caring about who you are. They're not really caring about what race you are. They're not caring about where you're coming from. They're not caring about who you know. They only care about, do you do good videos? And I believe this kind of approach now works for a lot of different areas in life. It's not yet 100% merit-based everywhere. Connections still matter somewhat, but I believe they matter way, way less today than they used to matter, say, 30 years ago. Nowadays, there's way more opportunity for the people that really want to put in the effort. The only problem is that nowadays it's just very few people that make it, right? In order to now have the great life, you really have to put in the effort. But if you're willing to put in the effort, you don't have to know the gatekeepers of this world anymore. You can simply just make your life work by providing value to the world, by having people find you. So on a macro scale, this is, I believe, not the best development, right? Because on the macro scale, most people will not be able to make the best content. Most people will not be able to make the best music or to write the best programs. Most people will be average, and the average person is falling behind. So on a macro scale, I totally understand why there's lesser and lesser families, why there's more and more divorces, why stress levels are increasing, why burnouts are increasing, why people tend to get sicker, while some countries even have decreasing life expectancies. We see this in the US, for example. Life expectancy there is going down now. I believe it's likely that a similar trend will happen in other countries as well. So for the macro, right, for everyone on average, this whole development isn't that great. But for the individual, for the person that's actually driven, if you're driven enough, this world is actually now better than 50 years ago. There's a real chance to make it without your parents ever having been rich. And when you do meet the threshold at some point, the rewards are enormous. They're way higher than they used to be.
This video is sponsored by the Premium membership. I never take any money from any crypto project. I never take any affiliate links from centralized exchanges. I never pump and dump coins. Instead, I offer valuable tutorials in the Premium membership. Feel free to check it out.
And so the key to this game overall is simply just to be very competitive. To whatever you're currently doing, do this with way more passion than others. So that's why you have to do something that you really enjoy doing, right? If you just want to do crypto on the side, right, you're barely interested in this, you maybe spend half an hour a day on it, you don't really try to become top 5%, then you're very likely going to even lose money, right? You're very unlikely going to outperform. If you follow any kind of career and you're not willing to put in a lot of passionate hours because you don't really enjoy doing it, then you've got a problem. So it's really important to be aligned with your passions to a degree. Ideally, you've got a passion that also pays itself. And of course, if the passion in general is considered not to be very profitable, then you have to be even better, right? If you're, say, a slightly above average programmer, you should still be doing somewhat fine because still a lot of programmers are in demand. If you are a slightly above average artist, a slightly above average painter, you're probably not going to do that well. If you're the best painter in the world, then you've got a social media following because of this, then of course you will have more than enough money. So passion is really critical. Passion is even more critical in the areas where there's only very few winners. So in competitive sports, you have this, for example, only a tiny percentage of people can make a living out of this, but the ones that do, they become ultra rich. In music, you have this to a degree. In art, you definitely have this as well. And in active crypto trading, you also have this. Only a small fraction of people tend to make most of the gains. So you're somewhat, at least for the next 10-20 years, on the safe side to do the regular careers, right? To become a lawyer, a doctor, a programmer. You don't have to be as passionate about it. Still, being at least above average, I believe, is hyper important. Over time, gains simply seem to concentrate in fewer and fewer hands. That makes a lot of sense, right? When you just look at average income growth, it's maybe 4 to 5% per year in fiat terms. Monetary expansion is more than 6%, it's 6 to 7%. So the average person loses income of around 2 percentage points every year. But at the same time, we see that investments tend to somewhat keep pace with monetary expansion, right? If you buy the S&P 500, you do make your 7-8% per annum, which is pretty much the same as monetary expansion. If you buy then risky stocks, as in tech stocks, then you tend to outperform monetary expansion. So when capital tends to return more than monetary expansion, labor, though, does not, then the capital-related occupations will tend to outperform over the long term. So if you're in property dealing, if you're in stock trading, if you're in M&A, if you're in any of those kinds of related careers, right, in the industries that tend to keep pace with capital expansion, then you should be fine. But even within those industries, of course, you also have a lot of concentration. So a lot of gains are now to be made on the analytical side, not anymore only on the networking side. Networking does not hurt, but it's not necessary anymore. One can make it simply just by being smarter than the others, simply just by working with more passion on the things that tend to be related to numbers to a degree. Crypto, of course, is very good for all of this because in crypto, we do have a public ledger, right? We've got all the data 100% open. We know what the whale wallets are doing. We know what retail is doing. We know how many new retail investors are coming into a token. We know how the social metrics are developing, how many new tweets are there about a project, how many YouTube views are there relating to a project. We can analyze all of those things. And this is where a lot of the alpha is, right? Simply just gather more data and get more insights compared to the average. And if you're in the top 10%, you should always be pretty good. If you're just average, if you're just in the 50%, you're likely going to lose, you're likely going to fall behind, especially in trading, which is player versus player. But over the years, in decades, you're probably also going to fall behind as an average person in pretty much any career. So don't settle for normal. Don't accept what is normal. I believe it's very important to strive for being better than the average person. If it's the first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish here regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. There's also a Telegram channel. In case you haven't yet joined our free Telegram channel, there's a link down below. Looking very much forward to chatting with you in Telegram. Cheers!